Hi everyone, it's BritSimon. So I'm going to do a video. I'm going to prepare a video for you here right now, which is to discuss the way AV queues work, the queue of cases in AV, and how that affects scheduling. Over the last few days, a couple of things have happened. Number one, I noticed a very egregious mistake. I believe it's a mistake by KCC. Is actually so egregious that I think a lawyer could successfully sue KCC to get additional EU cases scheduled in Yerevan. I don't know if there's a lawyer out there that wants to take this up, but if there is, it frankly is a slam dunk of a case, because what KCC did was absolutely incorrect according to their policy and in the way that they have described their scheduling priorities. So I'll come to that in a little while, but if you're from Armenia and you're at the Yerevan embassy, then you should stick around and watch this, particularly if your case number is between EU 21797 or 21798 and 27,500. If your case number is in that range, and you've not been scheduled for an interview, obviously, if KCC don't schedule an interview for you in the next few days, then I would suggest you speak to a lawyer. And in fact, what I think you should do is all is band together and have a lawyer work for you as a group, as a class. Because I believe that at least some of you could be scheduled, even though, let's say, Yerevan doesn't plan to take any more cases. I think a lawyer could easily force them to do that. So let me touch on the other thing. And this other thing is important for you to understand how bad the other situation in Yerevan is and why I think that's particularly egregious. The other thing is an expansion or a demonstration of how the queue of AV cases works. And it's because of a conversation that I've been having with a gentleman called Andrew in one of the Telegram channels. He watched my video on the AV queues, on how the queues of AV status cases are built up and how interviews are scheduled, etc. And he watched that and he came back to me and he said that he had studied all of what I'd said, and he'd studied the data, and I was wrong. So sorry, I don't mean to chuckle, but it's just I lose count of the number of times people tell me I'm wrong on things. It's kind of funny, but nevertheless, he's very determined. He's very, very determined, and so I've said to him, look, I can demonstrate how your theory, your hypothesis, is incorrect in very, very simple terms. So that's actually what I'm going to do. So more or less, this video is particularly for Andrew, but it's also very educative for anybody else that's interested in this process and how the process works with regard to AV queues and scheduling of cases, and why it is sometimes we see cases that appear to be prioritized from one region to another, or why sometimes cases with higher numbers get prioritized before your case. Okay, so that being said, let me show you my screen and explain a little bit about how queues work, right? So if you've seen my video before, and I'll put the link up here somewhere and below the video, so you can watch my video about how the queues of AV status works. If you've seen that, you'll know that cases are put into a queue on a numeric basis, month to month, and where that embassy, and this is per embassy. So where that embassy is has only got one region. That's very simple. Let's say it's an EU embassy. It's only got EU cases. Then they will get all of the cases that are now available to be scheduled for interview, because their cases the case is processed, the DS-260 is processed, and the number is now current. Right? If both of those things are true, then KCC's job is to order those cases in number order and load them into a spreadsheet. They maintain a spreadsheet. I've seen the spreadsheets. They load them into a spreadsheet where the number is supposed to be, the order is supposed to be immutable, unchangeable. It's supposed to be, once you're in that AV queue, you should not lose your place to other cases coming in after you, right? Shouldn't happen. Now, KCC staff are human. I understand that they make mistakes, but this is a relatively simple process, so it should be relatively trustworthy. And where it's only one region within the embassy, that I think works pretty well. But there was all sorts of discussion about this during a couple of the lawsuits that happened in 2020 and 2021, and also 22, I think. And we got all sorts of information and statements, sworn declarative statements from Miles Morgan, who is the director of KCC. So when they're swearing a statement, this has to be the truth, right? To the best of their knowledge. And they can make mistakes, but if they make mistakes, they must issue a correction to that, right? Because they shouldn't just make stuff up. And so there needed to be a legally defensible way to order these cases, to say, okay, we're going to give the first in, first out priority to the lowest number cases within that region, where the DS-260 is processed, and they will go before higher case numbers, right? That's what KCC have said they are doing. That's what they have described in their processes. And the only nuance to it is where you have an embassy which has got multiple regions mixed into it. Then how do they work that out? And I didn't know how that worked until I read the statement from Miles Morgan. And what he said was that those regions are ordered alphabetically. Now, that would put Africa before Asia, Asia before EU, Oceania before South America, right? And so they're ordered alphabetically and then numerically, right? So I'm showing on screen what that would mean if you had an embassy where there's African cases and Asian cases and EU cases. For the month of September, the AV queue, and this is September interviews, the AV queue, or the queue of cases, would have been built in this order. If it's true that they are doing African cases before Asian and so on, and you had an embassy where you had African, Asian, and EU cases that became current, then you would see African cases from 1 to 123,000, the highest case number possible. And those numbers would all go into the queue of AV cases before the Asian cases from 1 to 27,500. And then that would be before the EU cases from 1 to 50,000, right? Now that might not sound too bad. It might sound reasonable to you. If that's an African region embassy, that would probably be fairly sensible. But what if that's an EU embassy? Does that sound sensible? Sounds a bit weird to me. And guess what? That happened. That weirdness happened. And it was in Frankfurt in Germany, and it is for the month of September interviews. This is what's happened, right? This is what's being scheduled. Let me show you the data for this. Let me move this across. So in Frankfurt, here are the cases that got scheduled. Basically, they took 25 cases. You can see down here, count 25. Let me make this a bit bigger so you can see this a little bit more clearly. Yeah, you can see that pretty well now. There are 25 cases there. And because of the way that we scrape data, let's say, this is how this data comes out of SEAC, right? This is because of the way that we scrape it. We scrape it in alphabetical order and numeric order, right? So Africa appears on this list before Asia and Asia before EU. But you can see that this particular embassy in the month of September, for the month of September, took only 4 cases from EU, which is startling for Germany, right, for the Embassy of Germany. Why would that be only 4 cases? There are then 17 cases, I believe, from Asia, and there are 4 cases from Africa, right? Now, if you look at, let me just make this a tiny little bit smaller. If you look at this column, I've added in the month that case number was current for, right? And you can see that, largely speaking, almost all of these numbers numerically could have only been made current for the month of September, right? In fact, there was an fairly young EU case, and there from February, and there was an August case as well. That's not really a problem. That's not really what I'm concerned about. It's like, what I'm trying to sort of point out here is that Andrew says that these cases will be ordered numerically, ignoring their region. And so, okay, Andrew, if that hypothesis were correct, then explain to me, please, and I know you can't, explain to me, please, why Africa 77,000 up to Africa 86,000 is in there, but German cases of above 30,172 or EU cases above that number didn't get in there. Remember, the order that they should go in, I believe, is like this, right? I'm going to take Miles Morgan at his word and say, yes, they took all the African cases from 1 to 123. They took the Asian cases from 1 to 27,500, and then the EU cases from 1 to 50,000. But if that weren't the case, if it was purely based on numerical order, then we would have had more EU cases than these 4 EU cases, without a doubt. 100% certain that would have been the case, because you would have had all of the EU cases up to 50,000 would have been all lower than Africa 77,000, right? And so all of the 50,000 cases could have been in there, but actually these 4 cases from Africa somehow got in there before those cases. How did that happen, Andrew? You can't explain it with your hypothesis because it doesn't work. Your hypothesis is incorrect, quite simply. It's not numeric. It's not numeric regardless of region. It's numeric within the region, right? And the regions are sorted alphabetically. It is, in this particular case, this is exactly how it's worked for Frankfurt. And there's no need to look at any other month. You can entirely deduce this from this 1 month for Frankfurt. And by all means, go and explore that if you want to. But the point is that numerically, Africa shouldn't be on this list at all, and there should be at least 4 extra cases from EU. And in fact, the Asian cases finish at about 26,000. So maybe that, maybe you could argue that's okay. We'll ignore these 2 younger cases, these 2 lower number cases. We'll just take those numbers. But if there is a German case, and I know for certain there is, that is 30,300 and something, then that case in Germany, which is DS 260 complete, and I know it is. I'm directly in contact with a person who's in that exact situation. You know who you are, Sarah. So for our friend Sarah, her case is 30,300 and something, and she, according to Andrew's ordering, should have been here before the Africans, but she wasn't. She wasn't scheduled, and that's because of the way that they are ordering the AVQs when there are multiple regions in one embassy. Okay, so and you can say, okay, so why didn't they go further? Well, there's 25 cases, which is kind of a obvious number, which an embassy would say, hey, we'll take 25 cases for the month of September, right? So they got to the 25th case, they scheduled that EU case, and then they stopped scheduling. That's basically what happened. This order that we're seeing here is exactly the order that actually the AVQ would have been maintained in. That's exactly how it came out of the system. This is actually the order that it would have worked in, right? Just coincidentally with our extract from SIAC. But this is the correct order that they would have been scheduled in, according to sworn statements of Miles Morgan, the director of KCC, and according to everything we've observed over the last few years. So, Andrew, nothing has changed. Your hypothesis is incorrect. Nothing has changed, right? Now, with that being said, right, are KCC perfect? No, they're not. And I'm about to show an egregious example of where they've screwed up. And this is back to our friends in Armenia. So let's have a look at Yerevan's scheduling for the month of September. Yerevan took 50 cases, right? And again, it's a round number. You'll see this very often. You'll see the number of cases scheduled in a given month will be numbers like 20, 30, 70, 100, 25, 50, 75. You'll see this very often. What you don't see is 68 or and that there are numbers left off. If it goes to 68 or if it's 34 or some sort of randomish number like that, it's because there are no more cases, in there. The capacity of the embassy was set higher than 34, but only 34 cases were available, right? So maybe the embassy said, "Hey, we can take 50 cases," but there were not 50 cases for that embassy. If you see the number of scheduled interviews at round numbers or important numbers like 25, 50, 75, 70, those sort of numbers, it's because the limit has been hit for the embassy, that the embassy set their capacity as, right? So in this case, this is Yerevan, and there are 50 cases precisely that were scheduled for September in the month of September, right? Now, you can see that these cases were July cases, and then there are some August cases, right? And the way that the reason we're looking at cases which were current for the month of July and the month of August is because this embassy is backlogged. Unlike the example I just gave for Frankfurt, there was no backlog for Frankfurt, so most of the cases were September cases. In this case, there is a backlog at Yerevan, and so they're still working on July cases, right? But if they're working on July cases, then what should have happened was, let's have a look at the visa bulletin here. The visa bulletin. Let me see if I can pull up the visa bulletin. Did I pull that up? Hang on 1 second. Yeah, let me get the visa bulletin for, here we go. Perfect. I'm going to pull that across. Okay, this is the visa bulletin that will apply for July. So in the month of July, cases in Asia up to 13,000 became current. In the previous month, cases up to 9,000 had been current, right? And for Europe, bear in mind we're talking about Yerevan, right? A European embassy with lots of European candidates. Then they went from 21,000 to 27,500, and there's no Armenian accept number or anything like that. And so for an Armenian case in Armenia, in Yerevan, in July, cases were current up to 27,500, right? Now, in other words, that means that an EU case up to 27,500 is equivalent to an Asia case up to 13,000, right? Follow me so far? Hope you are. But let's look at this. We've got some cases here in August, Asia cases that were only possibly current. There's completely impossible that they could have been current prior to the scheduling month of August, right? And what we see is there are no EU cases here, other than one EU case, which happens to have a very low number, 7951. Okay, but if we look at what Yerevan has done year to date, let's just turn on all the dates here, and we look at the EU region in terms of what was the maximum number current, we can see, let me just make sure I've got the right data here. I want to make sure I've got everything. Yes. I've actually got the wrong number in my head a little bit, but it's the same roughly. I'm not quite sure why I'm looking at this. But anyway, this is case number EU 21643. is the last number that was scheduled, and that was scheduled in May, right? May would have been May, June, July. Yeah, May. So that was a case that had become current for the month of July, right? Now, in other words, they scheduled cases for the month of July up to EU 21643. If there are cases between 21643 and 27,500 in Armenia that had their DS260 processed for July, then those cases should have been in the queue of AV status cases for the month of July. Now, there could have been a cutoff, which meant those cases were in a backlog, fine. But what should not have happened is that cases from a later month, like August, should not have been scheduled before those EU cases up to 27,500 were scheduled, right? It should not happen. And what do we see in the data? We see 15 cases from Asia, which are August cases. This is absolutely a violation of their policy and of their description of how they order cases. This is completely unjust, completely unfair, and a violation of their policy, their stated policy in sworn documentation, right? Sworn affidavits by Miles Morgan. Okay. So what does that mean? Well, does it mean that they changed the policy? No, bullshit. Please don't come at me with that. It hasn't. They haven't changed the policy. That's an indefensible position, right? You cannot defend saying, well, yeah, we're going to give Asia cases the priority, even though they were not available for interview until August, when EU cases that were available for scheduling in July, when they just sit on the sidelines. You can't take those cases and put them in first. That's not right, right? Clearly, it's not right. So if I were an Armenian or anybody at Yerevan with an EU number between 21643 or whatever it was and 27,500, I would be saying to myself, hang on a minute, these 15 cases went ahead of me and they had no right to go ahead of me. There's absolutely no way they should have gone ahead, right? And so if I were a lawyer, if I were a smart lawyer, I would be saying to people from Armenia right now, well, if you are in that case number range and you think your DS260 was processed, then, let's do a lawsuit, let's sue. Because Yerevan may not have any more capacity for the month of September. They may not be deciding to schedule any cases, and you will therefore lose your chance. You'll lose your green card. But if a clever lawyer could go and make a case about this and scare the crap out of the government with what is obvious proof here, with these 15 cases, that lawyer could easily say, hang on a minute, you've broken your own policy. We've got your policy in writing. It's a sworn affidavit. You've broken that policy. Clearly what you've done is unjust here. And so you've got to fix it. And how do you fix it? How do you remedy that? And remember, the recent case talked about sanctions, right? The recent case where we lost the appeal for DV 2020 and 2021 basically said that we would not have any rights after September 30th, but we do have rights to sanction the government prior to September 30th if they screw up on something, right? And they clearly screwed up here. So, so what could that sanction include? Well, it could include having to schedule at least 15 more cases for Armenia in the month of September. And frankly, I don't give a damn that means they're going to be too busy. That's only right. Now, I'm not suggesting that anything bad should happen to these Asian case numbers. They haven't done anything wrong, right? It's not their fault that KCC has screwed up here. So it shouldn't result, and absolutely wouldn't result, in those cases losing their appointments. What should happen is that instead of Yerevan taking 50 cases, Yerevan should add some more cases. That's exactly what should happen right now. And the sanction could be that that Yerevan go back to the drawing board and figure out how they go and squeeze in a lot more cases, not just 15, but a lot more cases, to say sorry to the Armenian cases that they've just crapped on, right? So How a lawyer can sort that out, that's up to a lawyer. And there's a few good lawyers out there that may watch this, and I'll send this video to a couple of those lawyers and say, have at it. I'm happy to find. I know I can find Armenians who would feel unjustly treated by this, and why should they lose out on their green card because KCC effed up? That's basically the point, right? Okay, so this is an example where the queue of AV status cases has been misused, mishandled, mismanaged by KCC staff. It's nothing but that. I don't believe for a minute this was a deliberate slight against Armenians or anything stupid like that. That's just ridiculous. This was just a stupid thing to do, a stupid mistake. But unfortunately, the government needs to be held accountable for their stupid mistakes. And that is what we should do now, right? And it needs to happen fast. So if you are an Armenian in this position where your case number is less than 27,500, but greater than 21,643, in fact, forget that. It should be any case number less than 27,500 would have a chance here. And you are reasonably certain that your DS-260 was processed before July, and actually before July, right? So it would have been before May. Sorry, that your DS-260 was processed before May, but 100% certain that is going to be the case. There's no way in the world that the government is going to say, oh no, we didn't have any cases that were DS-260 processed before then. That's just bullshit. That's not believable. So there is no way out of this for the government. This is absolutely rock solid proof, and it's proof that they screwed up. Now, there's a lot of people that always talk to me about, I don't believe what you said because I found this example and that example and everything else. But whenever I ask people to back it up with evidence, they can't do it, right? So this is a case when I found something and I'm showing the evidence. I'm showing you the logic of the evidence, etc. So, so this is the standard of evidence that you need to bring forward. There is no plausible or acceptable explanation for this, without a doubt. And this is what you have to bring. If you're going to argue with me about something, you have to bring this sort of evidence. You have to bring logically reasoned evidence that is thought through properly, right? And if you're going to tell me things like Andrew told me that it's all numeric, etc., that hypothesis shouldn't just fall at the very first hurdle I throw at it, right? That's kind of foolish. So I'm hoping that you're all understanding. I'm hoping if you're an Armenian case or anybody who is assigned to the Yerevan embassy with a case number under 27,500, and you were DS-260 processed, and you have perhaps documentation, a letter from KCC before May, saying that your DS-260 was processed, then you are entitled to an interview, in my opinion, and we just need to get a lawyer on it. Now, lawyers don't work for free, okay? I know Armenia is not particularly a wealthy country, and the costs of engaging a decent lawyer, right, not some muppet, but some decent lawyer, is not going to be insignificant. But this is a green card we're talking about, right? This is a life-changing opportunity. So, you need to figure it out. If you're in a position where you think you can hold your hand up and say, yeah, I was affected by that, then you need to figure out how you're going to pay a lawyer. And it would be probably less expensive if a number of you got together as a class and engaged a lawyer as a class, as a group. Probably be less expensive, because a lawyer working for one client on something like this is going to have to charge a few $1,000s for sure, several $1,000s, right? But a lawyer working for a group of 10, 15, 20 people that want to try their luck, maybe that could be a lower per unit cost, right? And this wouldn't necessarily be anything about going to court, by the way. This This is a lawyer that would, basically put the government straight into a corner and negotiate a settlement. Because if they go in front of a judge with this, and it's carefully explained to a judge, the judge is going to get pissed off with them, and they would be quite right to call for some types of sanctions against the government for this sort of bad faith behavior. Frankly, well, it's a mistake. Let's let the lawyers put a name on this. I'll leave that to the lawyers. But I believe it's a mistake. But nevertheless, the government now needs to sort this crap out. All right. Okay. So I'm hoping that video was educational for you anyway. Whether you're involved in this particular little thing or not, it confirms this video should have confirmed for you and clarified how the queue works for AV status, how cases are scheduled, and in some cases how that means you can miss out by just a very, very small amount. As I mentioned, our friend in Frankfurt has missed out and has not been interviewed, even though her case number is very low, just over the 30,000 number that went current, and right at the beginning of that new current range. But Frankfurt couldn't get to her number because they were dealing with those case numbers in Africa. Right, that's literally what cost her her chance. Okay, everybody, hope this was interesting for you. I'll probably go live tomorrow morning. I'm not quite sure. I'm recording this on Saturday night. I'll probably record or do a live session for you tomorrow morning. And I think I'll probably post this as soon as I can this evening so that Andrew can have a look at this and go back to the drawing board. All right. Nothing against you, Andrew. I appreciate your trying to push the understanding. Everyone's trying to improve the understanding. That's fine. I don't know everything, but I know damn well that your hypothesis is not correct. And I just proven it. Okay, everybody. Thanks then. Bye-bye now.